So the concept is when we say, that Judaism was the first practice that had to do with one God, we don't mean one in the sense of number. The idea that it's not one, and that's a common misunderstanding. A couple of common misunderstandings, but that's one of them. That we're talking about the idea that the divine presence is everywhere. My particular, I don't know if people in all denominations share this, I don't see it as up there and down there. I see it as combined, and I mean we can talk about the God up there and the God inside, but to me they're all one, so on and so forth. So that's really the predominant sort of thing. People have some idea that Judaism is, in its history, is a religion of laws, the halakhic view, but that's a commonly misunderstood. It's one aspect of our background. A lot of it has to do too with faith, and a lot of it. One of our predominant creation ideas is that when the Holy Presence was making the world manifest, it didn't fit, and it was too big, and therefore the result was broken shards. And that the responsibility of people, and we're talking about Jewish people now, is to take those broken shards in ourselves and repair them. And that's why one of the predominant expressions of Judaism is tikkun olam, which means the repair of the world. And so when I think of myself as a Jewish person, this feeling affects, and viewpoint affects everything I do in terms of my own personal ethical disciplines. And that's a very, very important thing for me. Like, for example, in social justice movements, you'll see an unusually high amount of Jewish people involved because it's an obligation in the best sense of the word, like a yoke that we speak about in practice. I don't think of it. I think of it as a holy obligation to examine what I do, and that is. So a common story is, how do you know the difference between day and night? And someone says, when the rooster crows. No. It's when I can see the white of another human being's eyes. So there's the idea that we're not separate. And because of that, there's an obligation for care of other human beings and a care of animals and stuff. And do we agree about all the details of that? No. Well, of course they're Orthodox, all the Orthodox customs, where I think of the customs on Shabbat, on the Sabbath, where no work is done, you don't even rip toilet paper, and everything is this. For most of us, and we try, like for example, for myself, I try to at least set aside Friday night and Saturday morning. Okay, so what does that mean? You don't work, or in progressive modern Judaism, you don't work at what you usually work at. If you're an Orthodox Jew, you don't garden because it's work. If you're a progressive Jew, you garden because you don't do that on a regular basis. It's the idea, coming straight from text, that on the seventh day God rested. I try to literally use that day for contemplation, seeing friends, and getting together in that. Usually Friday night I go to services. So that's an important custom for me. And then, of course, there are holidays. Our main holiday is not Hanukkah. Just want to tell people that. Hanukkah is a post-text military event, which the rabbis were, really? We're going to celebrate that? I don't think so. So there's two parts. The first part is the New Year, Rosh Hashanah, and then there's a 10-day period very similar, I would say, if you want to do, to Lent, in which several things go on. You examine your conduct, predominantly. We don't give things up. And the most important element of that is, if you've had conflict with somebody, you try to make repair. Now, the interesting thing about, this is a custom, about forgiveness and repair. you go to the person and you try to this. But the rabbis, say complete repair is not made till the situation comes up again, and you refrain. So one of the students says, what happens if it doesn't come up again? And the rabbi says, don't worry, it will. Yom Kippur is a day of, 26-hour fast. But there's also elements. We don't wear leather because of the animals. We don't wash. We don't drink. We don't. And pretty much the whole day is spent in synagogue. And there's we have group confessions, not individual confessions. We at different points stand up and say, we've lied, we've cheated, we've stolen, all that sort of stuff. And the whole idea of Yom Kippur is it's a replication of a funeral service. So you come in white, in what you would wear to your funeral. And it's an idea that you are facing God, and where are you with that? Right after that, when Yom Kippur is over, we go out and we build a sukkah, and it's taken from something in the Yom Kippur service. We build this house, and the house has to have a roof open partly to see the sky, and it has to have sides open. Very similar to the tents we were in during the Exodus. So there's a lot of these kinds of customs that you see little parts in text, but they're elaborated on, and they're elaborated on considering which element of Judaism that you belong to. And then there's Passover. So another thing about Passover, it's a home holiday. A lot of our religious practice, like Shabbat dinners and Passover, are because people lived in diaspora in exile for many years. And so the celebration of Passover is usually in people's homes. Even though for convenience sake now we have it at our synagogue, but usually it's a home holiday. And it's the same thing. We don't eat bread. We don't, a whole bunch of things we eat because this is what we did. It's the idea about the whole concept of Exodus and the whole concept of freedom. In modern Judaism, you'll see some of the whole... Egypt is not a place. It's Mitzrayim. It's the narrows. That's what the translation is in Hebrew. And it means the narrow part of yourself, through your behavior. It's not a place. It's as a human being. Where are your narrows? And when we talk about it in a Passover Seder, many people, some people just read the blah, blah, blah. And what's the concept of liberation? And what's our responsibility to other liberation movements that are going on in the world, and so on and so forth. So that's an important holiday. If you look at the whole population of Jewish people, it's the most commonly celebrated of all our holidays. So many people who aren't Jewish, and we explain this to people all the time, think, oh, those are their texts, they sacrifice animals with that, those are kind of the foundational. We read them every week, and also we read something too from the prophets, from the exile, from the Babylonian exile. When people were exiled, they didn't have the temple, so the focus and the center of Judaism switched to rabbis. And in that, they created the Talmud and other books, which are the discussions of the texts. And that's where Midrash comes from. And I know you and I laughed about it, but the whole textual part of Midrash is when Moses was given the Ten Commandments in Hebrew, in our Torah, it says, and each person to their capacity, from the highest member of the tribe to the lowest serving woman, will hear it in their own voice. So that means that anybody is welcome to say this. And so in our yeshivas and Hebrew schools, a lot of discussion about what does this mean? What does it mean today? There's always, like for example, my grandfather's, good chunk of my grandfather's family were killed in the Holocaust. Mm-hmm. The relatives here pleaded with them, sent them money to get out, and they said, this is our home, we're not leaving. A encouraging story about that is one of these families, although the parents didn't make it, they gave their children to a local baker, and she hid them. She hid groups of children and then entertained Nazi soldiers downstairs in a bakery and got them to the partisans and then got them to Israel. And after the war, people said she was a collaborator, but people in town said, no, she hid children. And my grandfather, for her 80th birthday, found these children and had them all come back to Poland for a kind of reunion. So it's one of those stories. And I was born in 1946, and that event colored a lot of my